Okay, so I thought just briefly, considering the fact that we had a year and a half, we've barely had sirens during Tefillah, and we had one last night during Mincha and one this morning during Shachrit, and hopefully that will be the end of it. But anyway, it's a good opportunity to review the halachot of what happens, shouldn't happen, but what happens if there is an azakah in the middle of davening, and what do you do? So hopefully this should be limud and not l'maaseh. But essentially the first question is, I think it's obvious to everybody here that if there is an azakah and you're in the middle of davening, wherever you are, whether it's Shmoneh Esrei or Pesach Zimra or whatever, you stop and you go down into the miklat, into the safe space. That there's no question about. The question is, what happened if you were in the middle of davening at that point? You were in the middle of Shmoneh Esrei, etc. What do you do? Do you have to go back? To carry on, etc. So actually, before that, it's very interesting. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Daled, Nechot Tefillah. This is a siman dealing with hefsek, but he says, "Lo yafsek b'tfilato, v'afilu melech Yisrael shoel b'shlomo, lo yishiveno, aval melech oved gilulim, im efshar lekatzel, etc." So it starts off talking about a hefsek in terms of dibur, in terms of speech. If a king approaches and asks how you are, it depends if the king is going to threaten to kill you or not. But the classic example, in Maran Brachot, says, person's davening and a snake, they find a snake wrapped around their heels. Lo yafsik. Even in such a situation, you don't stop. Okay? That's the Shulchan Aruch quoting the Gemara. So I'm not going to be poisonous. It's not life-threatening. Whereas the reality in those days, the scorpion is going to be life-threatening and angry, right? Meaning if the reality is clear that the snake is going to be dangerous, then you would also stop. Again, all of that is talking, by the way, about stopping to talk. But in terms of stopping to walk in society without speaking, based on saw something, somebody started off saying obvious to everybody that you have to stop and go down to the shelter. It should be obvious to everybody. Nowadays, they said a number of years ago already, I saw this online, that nowadays we can compare the rockets to a snake versus a scorpion. Since we have Iron Dome and Chet Shalosh and whatever it is, most of the time the rockets, okay, they come, but they don't really cause any damage. So there was someone who wanted to say, therefore, it's like a snake, you should carry on and carry on davening. It's incorrect for a number of reasons. But I saw the following explanation against that, which I quite liked, which said that no, it's not that the rocket is not dangerous. Every rocket is dangerous. Every single rocket so many rockets are shot down, they land in open spaces or whatever it is. That's miraculous. It's not a proof that the rocket's not dangerous. It's a proof of what a miraculous situation it is that we're able to repel or shoot down, or etc. Poskim that minhag, shall I say, that if there is such an azakah, one would stop. One would stop and one would go down into the miklat, if you can, or into the stairwell or whatever. Now, what if you're in the middle of Shmoneh Esrei? So the halacha is as follows. You would stop, and you would go down into the miklat, and then you would carry on davening Shmoneh Esrei from okay? If the amount of time that you stopped for was a short amount of time, if you stop for the amount of time that it takes you to daven the entire Shmoneh Esrei, right? It took you a long time to get down, you couldn't find space, it was crowded, whatever. So then you would have to start again. If your hefsek is longer than the time it takes you from beginning to end, without a pause, davening Shmoneh Esrei, then you would have to start from the beginning. But if not, you carry on where you left off. Carrying on where you left off, meaning from the beginning of the bracha. If you're in the first three brachot or you're in the last three brachot, those are a unit. So you would go back to the beginning of those three, and then you would carry on davening. Yeah.
You got to tell somebody, let's go.
Yeah.
So that hefsek that you have to start over. So let's continue.
So if you're talking, if you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei, and then you start talking, so then you have to go back to the beginning, and you have to start again. Okay, but hopefully that should all be, as I said, lahalacha, not l'maaseh. But so we started talking last night about a question about Sfrat HaOmer, right? The question about the soldier who was unable to count, and he forgot, and he was very stressed, and he wanted to carry on counting with a bracha. So we saw the Shulchan Aruch said as follows. Shulchan Aruch said that if a person forgot to count one day, right, and you didn't count at all the next day, you don't say the bracha anymore. You carry on counting. Again, it's a very strange thing because it's only the Bahag. Again, according to the Bahag, only. Bahag is a very significant Rishon, but he's the singular opinion. Who says, according to the Bahag, it's all the person who missed the day counting is no longer chayiv to count. You're not in the mitzvah anymore. We don't paskin that way. We say, no, you still have to count. Then we continue. And this is what we stop it. Says Shulchan Aruch, but im u'mesupak. Im dileg yom echad v'lo safa. If a person can't remember if they counted a day or not, the person counted every day, but they might not wrong day, right? If you count the wrong day, you have not for the 8th day of the arm, counted day 7, we counted day 9, and then next night you realize, so you've missed the day. Okay, but let's say you can't remember. The Chazan says, and he counts whatever number it is. You say, wait a minute, didn't I say that last night? I counted or not? All right. I can't remember where I was up to. That's the okay. So if we can't remember whether we counted or not, or may have or may not have counted, then you carry on counting and you carry on with the bracha. We don't say a bracha. If we may have missed a day, we do say a bracha. So it says this is the Trumat Deshen. Remember Trumat Deshen 354. Trumat Deshen says that the reason is as follows. Well, he doesn't say the reason, but the Mishnah Berurah quotes the reason. He says, "Yispor b'shamim b'bracha the ikas fake sveika." Because we have a fake sveika. Why? Shema lo dilei klal. One sveik is maybe you didn't skip, maybe you didn't count the wrong thing, maybe you did count correctly. Okay. The end in zay lomar shedileg. And even if you want to say that you did miss a day, which is one suffix, maybe the suffix is that maybe the halacha does not count anyway, even if you missed it. So therefore, we have one suffix relating to whether you counted or not, one suffix related to what the halacha is, and then you can continue. You continue to count.
So you don't know if they do. If you make the problem and say, it's big two, you're saying 3.
Now you have to know before you have to check before you count. It's very easy to check. Well, if you're in shul, you just wait, or you ask somebody, or you check your app, assuming it's not Shabbos. But no, because if
Which day it is.
the halacha is whenever we have a birkat mitzvah, whenever we have a bracha, person has to know when you say the bracha, what the bracha is going to apply for. So, for example, the Gemara in Brachot has a discussion. A person has a cup in. So, what happens if you say the bracha with the intention that it's wine and it's actually water or whatever? So, the point certainly, l'katchila, a person has to know what the bracha. So, when you say the bracha for Sfrat HaOmer, you have to number one. You have to know which day which day you're counting, what the mitzvah is applying. Number two is if you're going to say the bracha and then count the wrong day, that's a hefsek between the bracha and the mitzvah, so it's going to be a problem. So a person needs to know. If I said the bracha and I counted, and then after I counted, let's say I counted 24, and then after I've counted 24, I think, wait a minute, maybe it's 25. Okay, peseda. So then count. But that's what we say, essentially, sveka. So I saw an interesting question as well. Meishav asks. He says, you're not sure whether you counted or not. So we have other dinim. What happens if we can't remember whether we said them? Do we go back or not? Right? Mashiv Aruach or Moridata or what's the din if a person gets to the end of Shmonah? Right? You get to the end of Shmonah, so the Chazan starts and he says Moridata, and you say, oops, I can't remember if I said Moridata or if I said Mashiv Aruach or Moridagesh. Right? So if you don't know, the halacha is we follow the chazaka. We go by habit. We assume that people are creatures of habit, and we assume that you go by rote. And whatever you've been saying for the past 30 days, that's what we assume. So Shmuel Meishav asks, he says, I understand the din of the first 30 days. Why don't we make a chiluk? Why don't we say that from day 30 onward, we're now past the first 30 days of the Omer? So you've been counting for the last 30 days. So for the last 90 days, why don't we assume that you know that you counted correctly? That's the question. Interesting question. So there are two answers. We don't find nobody makes a distinction between the first 30 days and the last 19 days. Nobody makes a distinction. So we could suggest one of two reasons. We could say, when do we say that there's a chazakah that I've been saying the same thing for the last 30 years? Right? You're saying the same word, the same thing every night. You're saying something different. Each night you're counting a different in a row, unless you got it wrong. Right? But there's no that you've been saying for 30 days. And therefore that would not apply. The other explanation is that it's not necessarily that we've said it 30 days, but it's that we've said it 90 times. Right? There's all discussion which we've discussed in the past about different additions. And so that was one explanation. Sure, if I count it or not, I can count the next night because it's a sveika. But there's another explanation. The Ketav Sofer says it's got nothing to do with sveika. It's a different reason entirely. The same psak, the same outcome, again, which is, if I can't remember if I counted last night, or I can't remember if I counted correctly, I can count the next night with the bracha. Even though if I missed it, I would not say. So one explanation we said was sveika. Ketav Sofer says differently. He says, really, the explanation is as follows. I'll read you his language. He says, Keivan de rova poskim svir aleidim valech. Since most of the poskim, most of the Rishonim hold that even if you missed a day, that's bahag, but we want to be machmir, so we hold like we go because we don't want to be with choshesh for bracha levatala. He says, therefore, if there's any sort of this side, there's not a sveika as such. Sveika is a very any other reason to be lenient that we can add in, then we can rely on the majority opinion. Again, really, we hold like most of the Rishonim who say, even if you missed a day, you can carry on counting. But because out of deference to Bahag, we don't want to, we want to be machmir. But if there's an additional reason not to be machmir, then we can be lenient. So for example, what would be an additional reason? Additional reason would be not that I'm not certain whether I counted the previous night. I might have counted, and therefore I can continue counting. So where else do they bring this up? There's a question which is asked, what happens if the chazan or the Rav is the one who's making the bracha each night, and let's say he forgot one night, he forgot to count, okay? And it's going to be very, very embarrassing that, the rabbi is going to stand up the night and it's going to say, sorry, can you say the bracha for me? I forgot. Now it could be, again, it depends who the Rav is, depends who the Kehila is. It could be in certain communities, the Rav might say, I want people to know that the Rav's a person as well, and therefore I'm not going to count, and it's not such a terrible thing that the Rav forgot. But in other places, it may not be acceptable. So you have an issue here of Kvod HaBriot. You have an issue of Kvod HaTorah as well. And therefore, based on this, the Shevet HaLevi and others say, based on this idea of the Ketav Sofer, that there's an additional grounds not to be stringent and to actually follow the other poskim. Therefore, you could still say the bracha in such a scenario. Basically, the bottom line is based on that reasoning. Rav Rimon said to the Chayal, he said, yes, you can carry on, you can count with the bracha. He told Rav Shechter, and Rav Shechter agreed with him as well. אבל מחנניה בן הקשה אומר, יצא הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל, לפחות תורה ומצוות, אז זה לא יגדיר צור ויעדים.